Hope that the audio is working now. Please let me know. Test 1, 2, 3. Do we have audio? That is the question. Do we have audio? Okay. Here we go. Stephen Giger says, yes, we have audio. Thank God. Okay. Sorry about that, my friends. In fact, what's going on is we're trying out a new audio system, and what I was going to ask you is the audio a little bit better than usual? And I hope that it is. Needless to say, a little bit of user error in setting it up. Okay, thank God. Now we're working, and people are saying loud and clear. So, welcome, Stephen Giger. Great to have you with us. Deborah Hazelwood says, yes, I can hear you, and so does Lynn Job. Thank God. Great to have you in the house, everybody. Okay. Nina, very good. Just shared it into the forum, so we should be getting our audience together. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with me as we sorted out these problems. And Janice says, yes, the sound is better. Thank goodness. Okay, so who's with us? Stephen is here. Melissa Eitel-Jurin, Sue Strauss, Sandy McMurray, Celsa Canedo, Kathleen Pepe Southern, Brandon, Christian Sullivan, Shalom from Tennessee, Martha Sands, we have sound. Looks like it'll fly, Wilbur. Love it. Janice in the house, Robin Stewart, Yehudit Sobel is with us. Fantastic. Bonnie Pritchett, hello from California. James D. Roth, I know from Indianapolis. Fantastic. Great that you're all with us, and we've overcome our technical difficulties. Okay. I can report, thank God, we are safe, but we are entering, what is this, our fourth day with a curfew. And here in Los Angeles, the curfew today was set for 5 p.m. And in Santa Monica, 1:30 in the afternoon. But it also seems like the protesters are getting control of the movement, which is beautiful. You know, it's so important that we live in America. People have a legitimate grievance. They want their voice to be heard. They're out in the street. They're marching. For the last few days, the protest has been hijacked by looters, opportunists, thieves, thrill seekers. You know, people who are just having a great time breaking into computer stores, taking what they want. Sneaker stores seems to be the theft of choice. And really the worst part of it is that they steal everything, they wreck everything, and then they set fire to the buildings. And so many of these businesses are family-owned, mom and pop businesses. And today I saw a beautiful video. It was an African-American woman was making the video. And, you know, there were two young women dressed in black, sort of, I would almost call it like chic black, what they were wearing, these leggings and tight-fitting stuff, and spray painting graffiti on one of these family-owned businesses. And the African-American woman said in the video, hey, what are you doing? The news is going to capture this and say that you're defacing property and say that that's what we're all about. This is not what we're all about. Why are you even here? And these women, all I'm going to say is they weren't African American. You know, it was so like, how can I put it? It was like they were trained to avoid confrontation with the actual protesters. I don't know who they were. I don't know what group sent them, but they clearly weren't there to protest the tragic death of George Floyd. They were there, you know, for the thrill seeking, to make a statement, perhaps to represent their own cause. But it was just great watching this young woman, this African-American woman, just, you know, stick it to them and say, hey, you're not going to hijack our protest. We're here to have our voice heard, not, you know, to have this whole movement scrubbed by thieves and looters and thrill seekers like you. So it was great. It was really great how she handled it. Okay. tell me we're still experimenting with the sound. Let me know if it's peaking a little bit too loud, if the microphone is too close to me. All right, let's learn. Actually, before we go on, Deborah Hazelwood, special thanks to you. Deborah made a nice donation to our nonprofit yesterday, and we're dedicating our learning to you today. And whoever you would like to honor, let me know in the comments. We are a nonprofit, and we were scheduled to have our annual fundraiser just when the pandemic began, and we decided to postpone it. God willing, it'll happen maybe late this month or next month. We'll certainly let you know. But anytime, all times is a great time to donate to any nonprofit. When you dedicate part of your hard-won money, your earnings, to good causes, you make God your partner. Makes God your business partner. When you tithe, when you set aside 10% of your income for good causes, we are an educational nonprofit. You know what we do. We share Jewish wisdom with the world every day, and it costs money to do what we do, to create this content, all the stories, all the videos, all the audio, the podcasts, everything that we put out. We have a staff. We need to pay everybody. So if you would like to support our work, the link is there on the Facebook description, donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. All donations truly appreciated. They enable the work that we do. Particularly dear are people who set up monthly donations. It helps us to have regular income that we can predict during the year as we budget what projects we can undertake, paying our staff, etc. We truly appreciate it. That's donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit. Okay, let's get to the teaching today. It's really beautiful. We are in Tractate Shabbos, the second volume of the Talmud. We're on Daf Pei Zayin. That's page 87. We are in chapter 9, Mishnah number 4. Yesterday we began to discuss this Mishnah, and we discussed that prior to the Torah being given at Mount Sinai, Moses received the instruction from God and transmitted it to the people that the husbands and wives should go apart, right? They should be apart for 3 days, meaning that they should not have marital relations for the 3 days, so that they would be sure to be in a state of tahara, a state of ritual purity at the time that they receive the Torah, when God's presence manifests so powerfully, the greatest moment in human history at Mount Sinai. We learned that Rabbi Yosei and Rabbi Yishmael understood those 3 days to begin on Wednesday, while Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and the other rabbis believed that the count began on Thursday. The Torah was given on Shabbos. The question is how we count the 3 days, given that days in the Hebrew calendar generally begin at night. So exactly how do we determine what 3 days is? And we saw yesterday that the problem was the instruction was given during the day. So does the day on which the instruction is given count as the first day, or does the first day begin that night? And in analyzing that question, we learn that the Jewish people are said to be a holy people, and one of the attributes of being a holy people is that they're modest. And so they don't make love outdoors. They don't make love with the windows open. They don't even make love in the daytime. Husbands and wives preserve that beautiful, mysterious, romantic intimacy by doing it in the dark. They can do it under certain circumstances during the day, like if there's a tremendous urge to do it, or the couple is going to be parted for a while because one of them is going on a trip. But they should still draw the curtains, make it as dark as possible, and if there's still a lot of light, that they should cover up. So today we continue to explore this question of how we're going to count the days between when the nation arrived at Mount Sinai and when the Torah was given on Shabbos. All agree on two things: that the Torah was given on Shabbos and that the children of Israel arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai on the first of the Hebrew month of Sivan. We're in that month right now. It corresponds roughly to the astrological sign of Gemini. I know that because I'm a Gemini and I was born in the Hebrew month of Sivan, this month. Okay, so they arrived at Mount Sinai on the first of Sivan, and the Torah was given on Shabbos. So the question is, well, so don't we know? Therefore we know how many days they were there. But we don't, because we don't know what day of the week the first of Sivan was. And our sages are going to argue quite a bit back and forth. What day of the week was it when we left Egypt, right? It seems to have been a Thursday. Excuse me. And the night before was when the angel of death passed through Egypt, and the people had the first Passover meal in their homes. They put the blood of the lamb on the doorposts of their houses so that the angel of death would know to pass over those homes and strike the firstborn of Egypt. But in between, because that happened in the Hebrew month of Nissan, so there was Nissan, and then there was Iyar, and then there was Sivan. And the thing about Hebrew months is they're not like months in the Gregorian calendar, where we know January always has 31 days, February has 28 days, except in a leap year, March is 31, etc. Hebrew calendar is different, especially in ancient times, because in ancient times, a new month would be declared each month when the new moon was seen and the witnesses reported that to the Sanhedrin, the members of the Sanhedrin charged with declaring the new month. So it was a little bit variable, and there was room to argue how it worked out. Basically, where we come out is that Rabbi Yosei interprets that the nation, the children of Israel, arrived on the first of Sivan at Mount Sinai, and the first of Sivan was a Sunday. And the rabbis who dispute Rabbi Yosei's position hold that the nation arrived at Mount Sinai on the first of Sivan, and the first of Sivan was Monday, right? So what it all boils down to is Rabbi Yosei says we got to Mount Sinai on Sunday, and the rabbis who dispute Rabbi Yosei say we arrived at Mount Sinai on Monday. How does it work out? According to Rabbi Yosei, we arrived on Sunday. On Monday, Moses ascended and descended the mountain and said on behalf of God to the people, "You shall be a holy nation. You shall be a holy nation to me." On Tuesday, Moses ascended the mountain and descended again, and then he commanded the mitzvah of setting the boundaries, meaning that the mountain, which was now going to shake, right, with God's presence and was going to be so powerful. This is also where we have in Psalms that the mountains skipped like lambs, right? It's like if you've ever been in a big earthquake, it's like the whole land was becoming fluid. But the mountain was going to be especially charged with this overwhelming holiness. And Moses told the people, don't step on the mountain. Stay back, because it's too dangerous for you to come that close to the divine presence. He did that on Tuesday. On Wednesday, Moses ascended the mountain and descended. And it's not a big mountain, but Moses is an old man. Are we hearing that 3 times, 3 days in a row, he hiked up and hiked down and then he spoke to the people? This is not quite spelled out, of course, in the Torah. And we have a tradition elsewhere. Things were becoming so powerful, so supernaturally charged. I mean, this is a nation that just 50 days before had come out of Egypt in the wake of 10 plagues, 10 miracles, the parting of the Red Sea. A pillar of cloud was with them by day, a pillar of fire by night. So it's not that surprising that Moses was just taken to the top of the mountain and brought back down by God. But Moses was having his most intimate and direct encounters with God at the top of the mountain. So now, according to Rabbi Yosei, on Wednesday, he came back down. He went up and then came back down, and he told the men to separate from your wives, right? You're going to be apart for 3 days so that for sure, there's no sort of leftover fluids from husbands and wives coming together that could render a person tameh, ritually impure, so that they wouldn't be prepared for the massive manifestation, the giving of Torah on Shabbos. That's according to Rabbi Yosei. The rabbis who dispute Rabbi Yosei held that the nation arrived on Monday. And by the way, no commandments were given on the day that the nation arrived, whether according to Rabbi Yosei or according to the rabbis. That day, they were just allowed to, we got here, set up camp, take a breather, right? The next day, the commandments start. So according to the rabbis, they arrive on Monday. On Tuesday, Moses ascends and descends and says, "You shall be a holy nation to me," God says to us. On Wednesday, God instructed Moses to set the boundaries about the mountain so that the people will not come too close. And on Thursday, Moses went up and came down and told the people, "Men, separate from your wives for a 3-day period." So the main dispute, as we said yesterday, Rabbi Yosei says the separation of husbands and wives began on Wednesday and, according to the rabbis, on Thursday. So why, if they're both saying 3 days, how could it come out on different days? One idea is because of the count, right? That it's going to be, we need 3 complete days. And right now we're hearing this command during the day, so we don't count this day and we begin to count tonight. That's one way of it. Now, what Rabbi Yosei says, so that in order to support his position that it can't, the commandment to separate was given on Wednesday, he says that, and he cites a Baraisa, which is, sort of given around the same time as the Mishnah, but with a little bit less authority than the Mishnah, teachings of the generation of rabbis known as the Tanaim, that Moses decreed 3 laws or 3 commands to the people, 3 actions that he took according to his own perception. In other words, he did 3 things that affected the people based on his own understanding of what was going on rather than what God told him to do. But God endorsed these 3 actions. God approved them after Moses did them. The first is that Moses added a day so that there would be a complete 3-day count. And how do we know, according to Rabbi Yosei, that God approved that? Is because God's presence came onto the mountain on Shabbos, not on Friday, right? So if indeed God meant 3 days, meaning today, tomorrow, and on the 3rd day I will appear to you. So if that started on Wednesday, then God would have appeared on Friday. So it's like God says, "Okay, Moses, I like what you're saying. I'll wait until your 3-day count is up, and then I will appear on Shabbos." According to the rabbis, that wasn't necessary because they didn't get there until Monday, and the count would be different. But most people do agree that the people arrived on Sunday per Rabbi Yosei, and so we adopt this teaching that Moses decreed 3 things for the people, and God approved. The first is that Moses added a day to that 3-day count to make sure that it was a complete 3-day count and that everyone was going to be in a state of tahara. The second thing that Moses added, actually, it really affected himself and his own family, but God approved it. And what it is so he told them all, husbands and wives, don't approach each other so that you're in a state of purity, ready to receive the Torah on the 3rd day, come Shabbos. So Moses thought to himself, well, okay, God is going to appear to the whole nation on top of the mountain, and give the Torah, give the Ten Commandments, a personal appearance by God to everybody. God would speak to the entire nation, and at that moment, they would all be prophets, right? Everyone in the nation heard God's voice directly. It's something that only prophets do. But Moshe knew that that was a one-time thing. In terms of giving all the other commandments, only 10 commandments were given at that moment, right, at that day. But there's 613 commandments total, so 603 more, and so many other teachings. I mean, the entire Torah. And that was going to be given to Moses directly, not to the whole people, God speaking to all the people, the entire Torah. Therefore, reasoned Moses, if the nation needs to be in a state of ritual purity, of tahara, in order to receive God's commandments, how much more do I need to be in a state of tahara? And since I don't know when God is going to speak to me next, God speaks to me when he feels like speaking to me. So I always have to be ready. So what Moses did is he permanently separated from his wife. He still loved her. It's not like, it was a divorce. It's just they didn't have marital relations anymore after Sinai. Now, Moses' sister Miriam would eventually try to intervene on Moses' wife's behalf and say, what are you doing? You have an obligation to your wife. That's another episode we'll come to later in our journey. But the fact is, Moses, physically separated from his wife, didn't have relations with her anymore, so that he would always be in a state of purity and ready to receive prophecy. And how do we know that God endorsed that action of Moses? Because after the revelation at Mount Sinai, God said to Moses, say to them, to the people, return to their tents. That the people should all return to their tents. And a tent is a euphemism. When you say it to a man, go back to your tent, it means go back to your wife. That's just commonly understood in the Talmud. Like a man's house is his wife, or a man's tent is his wife. It's a euphemism to use modest speech. And so he's saying, okay, God is saying to Moses, the moment has passed, they can go back. They don't need to remain in that state of purity anymore. And as for you, you stay here with me. So Moses was right that he's going to need to stay in that state of ritual purity. Now, Moses wasn't such a young buck anymore at this point. He's in his 80s, so maybe it wasn't such a big sacrifice, but maybe it was a really big sacrifice for Zipporah. Give it up for Zipporah. She made a personal sacrifice so that her husband would always be prepared to receive prophecy from the Lord. The third thing that Moses did, sort of based on his own perception, and this one definitely affected the entire nation, was that when he returned with the tablets, right? What happened at Mount Sinai? God spoke to the people. After giving 2 of the commandments, the people were like, I can't take it. I can't take it anymore. It's too intense. Please, Moses, you go talk with God. Take dictation from him. He'll give you the commandments. You give it to us. But if he speaks to us anymore, we feel like we're all going to die, like our souls are going to fly out of our bodies. And Moses asked God, and God said, they have spoken well. It's true. Not everybody can take the divine presence. It's not for everybody. So then Moses would go up on the mountain and spend 40 days and nights receiving the 10 commandments on the tablets and all the rest of the Torah. But it was embodied in those 2 tablets, the 10 commandments. When he was late coming back, the people freaked out, got scared, thought Moses was dead, and we have the incident, the terrible, terrible national disgrace of the golden calf. They weren't setting up an idol that they were going to worship as a god. They knew that God is God. God had just taken them out of Egypt. The purpose of the golden calf was to replace Moses as an intermediary between them and God. Remember, they're afraid they can't take God's presence directly, so they need an intermediary, and they're afraid that Moses is dead. Nevertheless, they were setting up an idol to be used in their worship of God, but to be used in a religious purpose, and they were dancing around it. And you know what? Right now that riots are going on around the country, it's not so different. It's like they start with a good idea, a good cause, and then the whole thing just devolves into debauchery and lechery and thrill-seeking. And they weren't looting stores. There were no stores in the desert. But it was that same kind of rush to the bottom of immoral behavior. When Moses came back and found them dancing around this golden calf, so he reasoned to himself. He had already learned from God that, well, in fact, all the people learned about the Paschal lamb, right? The Passover offering, which the people ate for the first time in Egypt on the eve of their departure out of Egypt and out of slavery. And at the time that the Passover commandment was given, and that you shall, register, that you will have a group that plans to be together in every home to eat the Passover lamb, and there shall be no alien among you. There shall be no alien among you. Now that, with this word alien, it doesn't just mean that there shall be no non-Jew with you when you eat the Passover lamb together. It means that there shall be no apostate Jew with you. This is actually one commandment where Jews who have given up Judaism are excluded. That's what it says here on this page in the Talmud. This is not to say that today, a Jew who has gone so far away from his Judaism that he's practicing some other religion, that he's not welcome at a Passover Seder. That's false. But in terms of when the temple stood and when we were actually eating the Passover lamb, we no longer do that. The Passover lamb was an offering that was brought, eventually would be brought in Jerusalem for hundreds and hundreds of years. But there should be no alien among the groups that had planned to eat the Passover lamb together, and that includes apostate Jews. So Moses reasons to himself when he comes down that apostate Jews can't even do this one mitzvah of eating the Passover lamb on Passover. Well, right now, all these people, like so many of them, it seems like the whole nation is dancing around this golden calf. They can't receive the Torah in that condition. I can't bring the tablets with the Ten Commandments into these people. That would make them all instantly sinners, punishable with the death penalty. And so Moses smashed the tablets. Now, you might think when you read this story in the Torah, he was just furious, and in a fit of passion, he just, without thinking so much, threw them down on the ground and smashed them. But what our sages are teaching is that Moses was acting like a rabbi who thought this through, and he smashed the tablets so that the contract between the people and God would not be valid at that moment, because if it was, it would condemn all these people to an instant death. And God had already shown that, if God didn't like something, you don't want to get on God's bad side. You know what I'm saying? So Moses smashed the tablets to protect the people. And how do we know that God approved Moses' action of smashing the first set of tablets of the Ten Commandments? 3 proofs are given here. The first is from Reish Lakish, and it involves a pun on the Hebrew. It says, you broke the tablets. God says to Moses, you broke the tablets. And that's, so you say that, asher shibarta. Asher shibarta. And Reish Lakish says that this word asher, which really just means that, like the tablets that you broke, it's really just a connecting word in Hebrew. And it appears many times in the Torah, and it usually is not given this interpretation. But in this case, Reish Lakish says that it's a hint. It could have been said a different way, and it suggests that your strength be true. Yishar kochacha. It's a little bit of a stretch because it doesn't always function that way. And so actually, other commenters, later commenters on the Talmud, bring two other proofs that are maybe even a little more convincing that God approved of Moses' action. Rashi says, well, when God spoke to Moses about the fact that he broke the tablets, he doesn't do it with any anger. God never scolds Moshe for breaking the tablets. And later he says, the tablets that you broke, put them in the Ark of the Covenant. And according to Rashbam, again, just like Rashi says, he didn't speak to you with anger whenever he mentions that you broke the tablets. And not only that, but he instructs you to take those broken tablets and place them inside the Ark of the Covenant, proving that God was not angry with Moshe, was not going to, create this reminder of a misdeed, if indeed it was a misdeed. God wouldn't have made that instruction if he had been angry with Moshe for smashing the tablets. And so this is the evidence that God approved of this action that Moshe took based on his own perception. And while we're talking about Moses acting, So we have this idea that it's like Moses, like the rabbis are quite fond of this idea that Moses was acting like a rabbi. In fact, we call him Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our teacher. The word rabbi means teacher. And so this idea that the rabbis of the Talmud, looking at Moses not only as the greatest prophet of all time, not only as the national leader at the time that we came out of Egypt, but also as the prototypical rabbi. And right as the Torah was being given, he also was adding interpretation. Rashi notes, however, Moses could do that because the divine presence was resting on him at all times. We don't, right? The early generations were much closer to the revelation at Sinai, and so they were living at a higher state of holiness than we are now. And even they, with the greatest humility, and discussing and debating it for generations and generations to figure out, are there additional laws that we can, add to the halacha to protect the people from violating Torah prohibitions? Okay, they would add interpretations, but this is not to suggest to us that, well, any interpretation that we see, as long as we think that it's an interpretation, a valid interpretation, we can live that way. No, it's not that way. Right? It's a system for the nation. There are sort of the elders in every generation can come together and evaluate, is something in the law that needs to be modified because the times have changed, and then they would do that very carefully, very deliberately. It's not for every individual Jew to go interpret the law as he or she sees fit. Okay. The rest of the page involves a lot of debating back and forth about the chronology, about how they arrived at how long Nissan was that year, the month in which we came out of Egypt, the following month, Iyar, and the month after that, Sivan, and exactly how things were dated and when was Shabbos given and when we arrived at the mountain, etc. So we're not going to discuss all of that. Kind of sort of like hardcore. If you're into dates and numbers, beautiful daf for you. But I do want to read one passage near the end of this page, 87, which discusses the first of Nissan a year later, right? So we came out of Egypt on the 15th of Nissan. Passover was the 14th, that night, and then we come out on the 15th. And that was in Nissan, right? And then 50 days later, we get the Torah at Mount Sinai. And then another, 10 months go by, and it's the second year. And the first of Nissan, the first of this month, and the first commandment that was given to the Jewish people as a people was about the month of Nissan. This shall be the first of months to you. You shall observe Rosh Chodesh, the holiday that begins every month. The first of every month is a minor holiday. It's actually one that's meant to honor Jewish women because they did not participate in the sin of the golden calf. So at the beginning of the second year that they're out there in the wilderness, Rav Havivi from from Choizenaa, said to Rav Ashi, "Come and hear a different proof from the following verse. And it came to pass in the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was erected." So they would eventually receive all the commandments pertaining to the tabernacle, the Mishkan, in the desert, building it, gathering it, all the stuff that was going to be necessary for it. And it was at the beginning of the second year that they would finally be able to start observing all these commandments pertaining to bringing sacrifices on the altar, the priests, the tabernacle, all of the ceremonies and the daily offerings and the holiday offerings and the guilt offerings and sin offerings and peace offerings and elevation offerings. All of that would begin when the tabernacle was erected on the 1st of Nissan, the beginning of the second year. And that day was incredibly special. That's what we're reading right now. And it was taught that day took 10 crowns. That day was, let's say maybe the second greatest day in Jewish history. The greatest was when God appeared to all of us at Mount Sinai. But the 1st of Nissan, about a year later, a little less than a year later, took 10 crowns. It was the first day of creation, meaning it was a Sunday. Every time Sunday rolls around, you can remember, this is the anniversary of the first day of creation. The first day of creation was a Sunday because the seventh day was Shabbos. So the tabernacle was erected on a Sunday. It was the first day of the offerings brought by the princes. When they inaugurated the tabernacle, every tribe brought a certain set of offerings, and it was brought by the prince of that tribe. It was the first day of the priesthood, the first day that the priests, the Kohanim, were able to serve in their function. The first day of service in the temple, the first time for the descent of fire onto the altar. Right? This was going to remain a daily miracle for as long as the tabernacle stood, which is about 400 years, and as long as the first temple stood, another 400 years. That there was a miraculous fire each day that would consume the offerings on the altar. This was the first time that consecrated foods were eaten, foods that had been consecrated, dedicated to God, in the context of the altar. The fact that people were bringing sacrifices was, of course, much older. Abraham offered sacrifices hundreds and hundreds of years before, and before Abraham, people all over the world were bringing sacrifices. But sacrifices dedicated to God according to the commandments that God gave for bringing those commandments, some of those offerings include food that is eaten, right? The peace offering, some of it is eaten, and several kinds of offerings, the priests eat some of it. The first day of the resting of the Shekhinah, the divine presence upon the Jewish people. The first day that the Jewish people were blessed by the priests, and the first day of the prohibition to bring offerings on improvised altars. Once there was a main altar, it was no longer permitted to bring any other kinds of offerings on any improvised altars. Now there would only be one altar for the nation. Once the tabernacle was erected, it was prohibited to offer sacrifices anywhere else. And it was the first of the months, and from the fact that the new moon of Nissan of that year was the first day of the week in the previous year, it was on the fourth day of the week, because very often the first of Nissan is going to be offset by 4 days from one year to the next. That is what I've got for us today. I want to foreshadow for you that tomorrow is a show you don't want to miss, a daf, a page of the Talmud, which is just one of those spectacular pages with many famous stories. Shabbos 88, big daf. It includes the story of when the children of Israel were at Mount Sinai. And there's a tale told by some of the rabbis that God threatened the people and said, if you accept my commandments, Good. If not, I'm going to lift this mountain. In fact, God lifted the mountain over their heads, turned it upside down, and said, I'm going to drop it on you if you don't accept the commandments. Now, some say that literally happened, and some say, well, metaphorically, of course, that's what happened, because if God, the God of the universe, is appearing to all the people and telling them that they're going to have these commandments that they're going to need to obey for the rest of their lives, when they say we will hear and we will do, meaning they agreed to be bound by the covenant, was that free will agreement, or were they coerced into accepting those commandments? We're going to be discussing that tomorrow on Shabbos 88. All right, let me check the comments for questions. I remind you, because people have been asking how they can support Accidental Talmudist. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and donations are the lifeblood of any nonprofit. Our yearly fundraiser was scheduled to happen just as the pandemic came in. We decided to postpone it. God willing, it'll happen toward the end of this month or next month. But if you would like to support us now because you appreciate the work that we do, donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. Also a wonderful opportunity to make a dedication of one of these classes, one of these learnings. Okay, so just checking. Okay, if that's a question. Lynn Job is commenting, we will do and we will hear. Na'aseh v'nishma is what the people said. It's an amazing thing that we said, right? We will do and we will hear. Like normally you'd say, well, okay, we're going to hear what you have to command us and then we'll do it. But we were saying, no, we're just going to start doing it and then we'll understand it later. And God liked that. That was a good answer that we gave God. Alice Gross says, looking forward to more revelation. I heard Mount Sinai was picked up and taken to Israel. That's an interesting tradition. I haven't heard that one. But Shlomi Zions, who is a travel writer for Ami Magazine, did go on, and he was on our podcast recently. He was on a live show. The podcast episode will be released soon. But he traveled to the place that has been identified as Mount Sinai in the Egyptian desert now. And there's actually it's a Christian monastery. I think it's called St. Catherine's. No one knows for sure. The Jewish tradition is we don't know. We do not know which mountain is Mount Sinai. We know that it's not the tallest of mountains. It was a very average mountain. And obviously what made Mount Sinai special was the giving of Torah, the presence of the Lord, the intimate bond between God and the whole people who were assembled there. That's what made the mountain special. And then, God sort of moved on from revealing himself in that specific spot. And then the actual location and identity of that mountain became shrouded in mystery. So no one knows for sure. I'm not seeing questions. Carolyn Dobson Chavez says, by the way, I heard another Accidental Talmudist podcast today while exercising, and I'm wondering if the author of that science fiction book, that's Donnie Collin, took your advice about prayer. I remember we had a great conversation with Donnie. Donnie's such a gifted science fiction author and a very spiritual guy. But what he had never done is say to God, I love you. And this is advice I give to all people. God really appreciates it when we say to him, I love you. The commandment to love God. I mean, if you're in a relationship with someone that you love, you tell them you love them, right? You tell your wife, you tell your mom, you tell your children, you tell your siblings, you tell them you love them. Try, if you've never done it, say to God, you can do it in a private place so no one will think you're nuts, and just say to God, I love you. And then just let it sit. You will find that it'll come to you to continue that conversation. And very often it's a very beautiful conversation because you can feel that you're being loved in return. God is the strong silent type. Odds are you're not a prophet. You're not going to hear God's direct voice in your ear. But when we tune in to the language of events, we start to see how very much God loves us. even in the toughest times, when it's almost impossible to understand why this too is for the good, we can hang on to that thought that God is very loving and has arranged everything for a reason. We just can't see it while it's happening. But how often do we look back on the tough times in our lives and realize, wow, that was really hard. I was so bitter then. But in the long run, it was definitely for the best. And we learn so much more from the tough times than we do from the easy and good times. So that's all part of our journey. Robin Myers, was it ever stated that before the fall of Adam and Eve, that the first sacrifice was to clothe them with human skin because God is spirit? I'm not familiar with that, but we do know that sacrifices, the idea of bringing sacrifices to the Lord to give God of our best, does go all the way back to the first family. Not to Adam and Eve, but to their sons, to Cain and Abel. Right? Abel was a shepherd, and he brought the best of his flock. Cain was a farmer, and it's unclear what he brought. He brought something, right? And God accepted Abel's offering and didn't accept Cain. Some say maybe he wasn't accepted because Cain didn't give the best. Or maybe just God, was only going to take one gift that day, and what he was saying to Cain is, and I'll accept yours tomorrow when I can focus on you. Today I'm focusing on your brother. Let him be celebrated for bringing the first offering first, right? Abel brought the first offering. Unclear. But Cain didn't like it, and he devolved right into the petulant, emotional response of a child and tragically murdered his brother because he was angry and disappointed that he himself had been rejected. Abel didn't do anything wrong. And you can stick up for Cain and say, no one had ever murdered someone before. Maybe he didn't even know that murder was possible. Maybe he didn't know that you could kill a person and they wouldn't rise again. They'd never seen death. It was new. And Cain was not, given the death penalty for what he did. But the earth would no longer yield its fruit to him. And so what offerings he was going to bring to God in the future would not come from the earth. And so Cain became a person in search of his mission. And as I always teach, when we're not sure what our mission is, we don't just throw our hands up in the air. We ask ourselves over and over and over again, what is my mission? What is my mission? What is my mission? And once we think we know what it is, we keep asking ourselves, am I on mission? Am I on mission? Am I on mission? And your clue is, are you doing a thing which benefits others and which only you can do? That's your clue, right? There's something that you can do for other people. It may be very small, maybe very big, but it's something that you are uniquely suited to do. That is... the last comment will be for Sharon Frant Brooks. I believe the second tablets were more accepted by Israel because it was a creation in partnership with man and not solely from God. That is a beautiful, beautiful teaching. When the second tablets were made, they weren't created only by God. God said to Moses, you carve the tablets, I will inscribe them. Whereas God had made the first set of tablets himself. And that beautiful partnership, right, of living within covenant in this world, that we do it together. God commands us and we bring all of our energy, love, and creativity. That's a beautiful partnership. Thank you for listening today. Again, if you'd like to support our nonprofit, donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. It is great to share Talmud with you in the afternoon, and definitely tune in tomorrow for Shabbos 88, one of those famous pages in the Talmud with so many rich, rich stories.